Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, and you're invited to join us here. If you want, the toll-free number is 855-450, free like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We have the Discord on-air call-in line rooms. They're open and available to you. If you want to join us there, you can talk about anything you want, and if you're on Discord, you'll sound almost like you're sitting here in the studio with us. And tonight, in the studio, it's Ian.
Melanie.
Aria.
And of course, you can bring up anything that you want here on Free Talk Live. That is the point and the purpose of this radio program. Mark is out sick tonight. He's actually going to be hopefully doing better tomorrow because he's going to be sitting in with a special guest co-host who I don't know if I should reveal right now who that will be tomorrow night. So we'll see. Anyway, Aria, I heard on Call to Freedom, your show this afternoon, you guys were talking about Karl Marx.
Indeed.
And, of course, a lot of the people on the left socialist side of things like to pander to the workers. They are in favor of the workers, right? The idea is that the workers should seize the means of production and run things better.
Well, they're certainly in favor of power. And the whole Marxist ideology, as we came to discover, was mostly an excuse for workers or for people to seize power, quote unquote, on behalf of the workers. And just sort of become an omnipotent state.
Well, they don't really want the workers to be part of the state. They just want the workers to do their bidding.
They just want the workers to believe that they're part of the state.
There is a situation that I think is related to that discussion that you guys had on Call to Freedom, which is the website back, or should we plug something else for Call to Freedom? What should we plug for?
The podcast is fine. CallToFreedomLive.podbean.com.
Perfect.
The website will be back as soon as I finish emailing Derek. Not Derek J. Different
okay.
Derek.
Derek Slopey. Good guy.
Yep.
All right. So Uber and Lyft, New York City, Wednesday morning. Drivers will be protesting. They are going to have a strike in New York City. Now, we don't know how many of them will be participating in that strike because obviously they're not all necessarily in agreement with one another. I don't know how many thousands of Uber and Lyft drivers there are in New York City, but I suspect it is thousands and thousands of them, if not tens of thousands of them. And the stories are all over the news media. I tried to find one that would kind of give a good overview of what's going on, because there's a lot involved in this situation that's sort of developed there in New York City. And I had asked you guys before the show how many of which of you have been inside an Uber or Lyft or a ride-sharing service. Have you? Did you say you had, Melanie, at one point? Do you remember what city you were in at the time?
Manchester.
Oh, okay, so local to your house, then where you live. I've done it in a couple cities here and there, in like Austin, Texas, and I forget where else. And it's always a nice experience. The drivers are professional. The cars are clean, and they've come up with a nice system to make it so you don't have to fumble with cash when you're getting out the door. You just basically, it's all done on a credit card through the app. That basically you create your account, you put a credit card on the account, and then you say, I want to go. I just got to the airport. I want to go to this place in the city, and then somebody comes and picks you up, and they drop you off, and I like to tip just because I like to tip the driver. But it's not a requirement with Uber. So the typical ride is you just get out at the end of the ride, and then Uber hits you your credit card, or Lyft. Basically they work the same way, and that's it. And then the driver gets, I think it might be down to 70%. When we first started looking at Uber back several years ago, when they were in the news for essentially disrupting the taxi cab industry, which was one of the really good things that Uber and Lyft have done in the world, is sort of upend this old established industry that is just slow and incompetent and tied in with government in so many ways. And so, they deserved a lot of kudos for what they've done, but then they cut back the rate from 80% of the fare going to the driver to 75% of the fare. And I think they might have cut it back to 70% of the fare at this point. Maybe there's an Uber driver out there listening that can say. And I'm not sure what Lyft's pay is. I don't know what it has been or what it might have changed to.
In theory, I like Uber and Lyft, and I do like what they've done to the taxi industry because it is so intertwined with the state. But I'm not a fan of how they're not really upfront about the damage people are doing to their vehicles.
What do you mean? Who's doing to who's to?
Any Uber and Lyft driver.
You're saying the customer, the passengers are doing damage?
No, the driver.
You mean the cost of upkeeping and maintaining
the long-term costs of being an Uber and Lyft driver are certainly going to outweigh any possible short-term gain.
Well, that is one of the big questions about this is, how much does it really cost a person to maintain a vehicle while, working for these companies?
I don't know how that's a question. I mean, the numbers are there. I haven't run them because I don't know what they're actually getting paid. Like, it's a calculable thing. It's not some unknowable wild card.
Well, it is a calculable thing, but it's one of those things that you kind of have to calculate after the fact. You can't really.
Not. Like, what the life of the car is going to be roughly.
No, you don't. Didn't you just have a car go into the shop today that's 2 years old?
Okay, but if you have, first of all, if you
is
only
it a 2-year-old car?
Yes. If you have a smaller car, those tend to last longer. But you have an expected life of a car.
Sure,
like,
but you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, but you don't know with cars. They're machines, and they can go bad at certain points, unexpected points. You're eventually going to spend something repairing the machine. You just don't know at what point or how much that machine is going to cost you. So you just had a transmission blowout or something like that. You're basically having to scrap the transmission, which is not a cheap part from what I was overhearing the conversation you were having with my roommate, who's like a car guy, and he knows a thing or two about these things.
If you don't need something that big, and so you're getting something more reliable,
well, if you're just talking about a regular oil change, then yeah.
No, we're talking about how many miles does this car have in it before it's used up?
How many miles did your car have on it before its transmission blew?
76,000.
That's not a lot of miles.
It's not, but I also needed a bigger car. Like, if you're driving for Uber, you don't need a van. You don't need all that cargo space.
Okay, but whether you have a van or not isn't a factor.
Well, yes,
on
it is,
when
because a
thing
Camry is going to last you longer than a minivan.
So I'm not an automotive person. I think I've heard, Aria, that you like to fix cars. Does the size of the vehicle have anything to do with when a transmission's going to blow out?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say here is unexpected things happen.
Well, okay, it's not like the car is bigger, therefore it's less reliable.
So I don't know what the relevance
so
of it.
There are cars that are more reliable. Those tend to be your smaller cars. Toyotas are more reliable. They're also smaller. If you need something bigger than a Toyota, then you can't buy a Toyota. If you only have 1 or 2 passengers at any time, then you can buy a Toyota and say, okay, this is going to last me 100,000, 200,000, 150, whatever it is.
Sure, it's going to last you for that much time, but you're going to have to put money in repairs over that time
Especially at
frame.
the 80,000 to 100,000 mile mark.
Yeah.
That's when things like your transmission will start blowing, if they're going to blow.
Well, on a Toyota, I got to say, I've had really good luck, right? Like the Toyota I've got a RAV4 that I drive, and I got it 130,000 miles. That's when I bought it. And, they say that's just broken in for a Toyota. So maybe there are some cars where you need to swap out a transmission at 70,000 miles. But in the time I've had Toyotas, I've never had to do that.
There's still an upper limit. Like, the car is like, there's still like a best case scenario.
Sure.
Like,
say 300,000 miles. That's a pretty best case.
That might be a little bit beyond best
case. It's a little
case
optimistic
for your newer cars. But so it's only going to last you that long. You need to divide the cost of the car over that many miles. And I don't think that everybody is doing that.
I agree with you there, but I'm also saying you're not factoring in the unexpected repairs.
Well,
so you're saying divide the cost of the car over amount of miles.
This is going to cost you $84.32 every 100 miles. But there is a reasonable estimate of what any given car is going to cost you.
The toll-free number here tonight is 855-450-FREE. So anyway, these employees, or not employees, and that's one of the arguments actually, is some of them are arguing they're employees, not contractors. The people who work for Uber and Lyft historically have been contractors. And there's a certain group of them that have been pushing to become employees. And there's a big difference between an employee and a contractor. And further, there's supposedly going to be a bunch of them protesting by logging out of their apps on Wednesday morning across the United States. We'll tell you more about it. It's Free Talk Live, and if you are a ride-sharing driver and you want to, I don't know, comment on this, because there's 3 people here who are doing a lot of speculating, and I have done a little bit of ride-sharing driving, but not enough to really be able to say, I have significant experience at it, because I got fired, basically, by Uber. And they never really told me why, even though I was a 5-star rated driver. I had nothing less than 5-star ratings. They put me on what they call the wait list after some amount of time, and then 9 months later decided I was no longer going to be able to drive for them. And I believe this is because of some local haters who reported me to Uber. And I could speculate as to why. I think it coincided with the FBI raid on the studios back in 2016, because it happened at about the same time, shortly after the raid. There was a post made on a local group of haters on Facebook where they. So I'm not speculating that they reported me. There was a post where they said they had reported me to Uber. And over time, I had sent emails to Uber saying, hey, I see that you've put me on a wait list, wondering what's going on. Maybe I could help you. Maybe you could ask me whatever question. Maybe you've got a question for me. Maybe you'd like to talk to me about whatever it is that has been said, because I have no idea. And Uber was very hard to get a hold of, and then finally when they did respond, it was like, when we're ready to ask you a question, we'll send you something. And they never sent me anything. They never even bothered to ask me for my input on anything whatsoever. They just got rid of me. So it's not like I'm a huge fan of Uber necessarily. I think they've got some pretty questionable business strategy.
I would like to see them accept cryptocurrency. That would be really awesome.
I could have sworn I saw an article that down in Argentina they are accepting, or at least at one point did accept Bitcoin due to some kind of government regulation that got in their way. And I'm sorry I don't remember the details of that, but yeah, that would be great if they did that. Of course, they're not the only ride-sharing company out there. In fact, we're going to address how these new rules in New York City are going to affect other ride-sharing, the smaller competitors to Uber and Lyft. But there's a lot going on in this area of ride-sharing services, and it's culminating now in what is going to be a 2-hour-long strike in several major cities around the world this Wednesday. So 2 days from now, we'll tell you more about that, and also want to make sure that you know about Bitcoin.com. Bitcoin.com is your premier source for everything Bitcoin Cash related. Bitcoin.com can help you choose a Bitcoin Cash wallet. You can buy Bitcoin Cash, and they'll show you where you can spend your Bitcoin Cash as well. You can read the latest news on their news site or engage with the community on their forum. It's all over there at Bitcoin.com, and that's actually where we're going. Mark and I are going to Tokyo this week to go and spend some time at the Bitcoin.com home offices there. So that should be fun. Bitcoin.com. As we continue here, the story from TheVerge.com, which I think tends to have a bit of a leftist leaning to it. Uber and Lyft drivers are planning a 2-hour strike in several major cities around the world Wednesday in an effort that is meant to coincide with Uber's forthcoming IPO. So they're going public. Labor groups organizing the strike are protesting the company's payment and labor practices, and they hope to stymie the ride-hail apps during the crucial morning hour rush on the day before Uber is expected to debut in public markets. Ride-hail drivers in New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, and Los Angeles are scheduled to go on strike from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Wednesday, May 8th, according to the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Drivers in several cities in the UK, and by the way, I think it's suspect that the New York Taxi Workers Alliance is behind this strike. It seems to me like the taxi workers aren't the same people as the rideshare workers.
I would agree.
Yeah, the taxi industry is the industry that has been upended by the ride-sharing companies, and they don't like the ride-sharing companies. And so it would seem to me that if the Taxi Workers Alliance is asking ride-sharing drivers to turn off their apps that morning, that would only benefit the taxi drivers.
That's what I was thinking, is that, it's going to create an opportunity for some people to say, screw the strike, and make a lot of money.
Well, yeah, if you are an Uber or Lyft driver and you do not participate in the strike, then you will likely do very, very well during those 2 hours because, basically the amount of potential drivers out there will go down. And And on these platforms, when that happens, I presume Lyft operates the same way, but on Uber, when there aren't enough drivers around to service the number of passengers who are demanding rides, the price goes up. So they have what they call surge pricing, where it can raise the price from whatever the normal rate is upwards of 9 times the normal rate. Now, it's pretty rare that it goes that high, but based on however many people are wanting a ride versus however many drivers there are in a vicinity, they'll raise the rate 2x, 3x, 3.5 times. And then there's like a little map where if you're a driver, you can look on the map of, let's say you're in New York City, you can see, over here in Manhattan, there's like a red zone where it's 5x. Because there's some convention that just let out, or over here there's a sports stadium where a game is just ended and now it's 4x. So you can, as a driver, where the hot spots are, and you can go to those places and work there, and then you'll get paid more. So this could be a real boon to those drivers who don't adhere to whatever suggested protest is going on here. Drivers in several cities, including in the UK, including London, Birmingham, Nottingham, and Glasgow, are also participating in the work stoppage. According to The Independent, Uber is expected to go public at an eye-popping $90 billion valuation on May 9th.
Now, is that their whole issue? Is that Uber is going public and they don't approve?
No. Okay. No, this is all about there's the group of drivers who are fine with being contractors. They like the idea of being able to make their own hours, because when you're a contractor, if you're Uber and Lyft, one of the selling points is, hey, you're your own business. You get to decide you want to work at night, you want to work during the daytime, you want to work Wednesdays, Fridays. You pick whichever days because you log in to the app when you want to take rides. And if you're the nearest driver to a passenger, you will get the ride request. And then, somebody, let's say you've got your app on and the ride request comes through, but you were at the gas station and you didn't have your phone with you. You didn't see it come through. Well, then that ride pings to the next closest driver. So you got like 10 seconds basically to say, okay, I'll take the ride. I'll take the fare.
Clever.
So there's the kind of people who are like, they're cool with the arrangement, they're happy with it, and they're just working. And then there's the kind of people who feel like they are owed something because they've downloaded an app and have a car. And they feel like they are not making enough money and that they need to make more, and they need the government to step in and make sure that they can make more. And that's who is behind this strike. The people who want, rights. They want to be treated as an employee. They want health care coverage. They want, all the benefits that an employee gets. They don't want to be contractors. In fact, there have been court cases, not just in the United States, but also in the UK, about whether or not these drivers should be considered as contractors or employees. Now, an employee isn't a contractor. An employee is somebody who you tell when to show up. An employee is somebody who gets paid, when they... Well, we can continue here in moments. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. If you want to join us here, especially if you are a ride-sharing driver, Uber, Lyft, or one of the other companies, 855-450-FREE. You can weigh in on how you feel about this strike coming up.
I want to tell you about my favorite cryptocurrency wallet, Edge Wallet, at edge.app. Edge is the wallet I use more than any other, and that was true long before Edge Wallet became a sponsor of Free Talk Live. Edge Wallet allows you to buy, sell, trade, and securely hold your cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, tokens, Monero, Ripple, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, and more. It's available for both Android and iOS, and you can download it via the Play or App Store or via Edge Wallet's website, edge.app. Secure your freedom with Edge Wallet.
This is Free Talk Live, and you can bring up whatever you want here. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. Maybe you are an Uber or a Lyft or one of the other ride-sharing company drivers, and you want to weigh in on this expected protest, this work strike, basically, that's only going to last 2 hours, so not exactly a particularly extended strike. I guess that's sort of acknowledging that these people probably need to go to work in order to make some money, because they're not going to get paid if they aren't logged into the app giving people rides.
I'm definitely unfamiliar with a strike having a time limit on it. I mean, don't they usually go until some goal has been achieved?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, your typical strike that you're talking about would be like, the workers outside of the employer's office. They've got picket signs and, they're outside of the gates and they're trying to stop the scabs from coming in, and they're out there until X occurs, until whatever demand that they have is acknowledged. In this case, they just want to show themselves. They want to show how strong they are. They want the strike to impact Uber and Lyft as far as they want to see a noticeable dip. Basically, they want to show their strength essentially over just a short time frame. And so again, if you want to weigh in here, our toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. We have the Discord call-in line rooms over at discord.lrn.fm. Let's go a little bit further, deeper into the story here. Again, Uber expecting to go public this Wednesday with their IPO, meaning people can buy stock in Uber as of Wednesday. And for those that aren't aware, Uber's been losing money basically the entire time they've been in existence. So it's not
interesting.
Yeah, it's not a profitable business. For whatever reason. I don't understand, why that is exactly. They take roughly 20% of every ride, but I guess that's still not enough for whatever overhead they have. Maybe it's all the legal fees that they have where they've been fighting governments across the world. I mean, that could be a very, very expensive thing to do. And I think in a lot of cases they've done a good job fighting the government regulators because basically, their argument is, well, we're not a taxi company. We don't have a fleet. We don't have actual taxis. We don't have our own cars. Uber doesn't own the cars. The driver does.
That's a legal government the mess made. I mean, in realistic terms, yeah, they do have a fleet of drivers that they can dispatch to wherever the drivers are needed. But it's not their
responsibility to repair the fleet. If you're a taxi driver and your car that you're driving breaks down, well, it's not your car. You go and, somehow the company tows the car. You get the car back to the station. They may have their own repair wing, or they've got a company that takes care of the repairs for them. It's the taxi company's responsibility to take care of their cars. In fact, sometimes the drivers will actually rent the car in order to take it out on the streets. So sometimes they even have their drivers pay to rent their cars. In the case of Uber, you got to bring your own car, and if your own car breaks down, it's your own responsibility, which is what we were talking about in the first segment where, Melanie, you were saying most of the drivers probably don't factor that in. That's not at all
what I was talking about, because that's a completely separate issue than how long is this car going to last you. It's going to last you.
Well, no, you had said they aren't calculating those things.
Yeah, they're not calculating how long the car is going to last you. All cars need maintenance, whether it's 5 years from now, 20 years from now, or 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a separate thing from, okay, this car is only going to last you X miles. So if you're using those miles to do this job, you need to divide the cost of the car by that.
Right. You were saying they're not doing that.
Yeah.
They're not doing whatever math.
They're not, because if they were, they probably wouldn't be doing that job at that rate.
Well, see, that's what I disagree with. I think there are some people who have done that, and they've found that they're making enough money, that they're able to feed their family, they're able to, work the job that they want to work in this case, and set the hours that they want to set. I mean,
but none of those things have anything to do with whether or not you're getting the value of the car back.
Well, they do, because if you're able to do all of that, then you are making enough money to replace the car when it breaks down, or when it needs to be replaced.
True, because you've already paid for the car.
That's the point I was about to make, is that, I doubt that's true in the longest term. It may be true in the short term within a 2 to 3 year range. It may even be true within a, 3 to 5 year range. But anything over that, I don't think within 5 years they'll be able to make enough money to cover all of the maintenance that they're going to have to do on their vehicle, as well as have money to replace that vehicle when it finally gives out, or when it stops being cost effective to repair it.
Well, then they're not making back the value of the car. Because you already paid for the car.
Well, we're speculating that they're probably not.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we've had people call in.
They're not.
I suspect you're right that many of them aren't doing the math necessary, but there are obviously some who. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of drivers around the world. Surely, some of them are capable of doing the math.
I don't know if they're getting paid outside of the U.S. So maybe, in Argentina or wherever, they have a different deal and cars are cheaper. I don't know. In the U.S., I don't see that making sense in most places.
So we can go on here. We got Jimmy. He's on the line in Massachusetts. He's calling about Uber. Go ahead, Jimmy. You're on Free Talk Live.
Yes, I want to say about libertarian acceptism and Uber.
What?
I think it's a thing to put out. Sometimes libertarians can get the wrong idea about certain people that may seem a little obnoxious, but I think people should give other people time, because when we're doing libertarianism like Aria and you do, Ian, we're trying to get them into the libertarian mindset, and sometimes some people are a little rough around the edges. I'm actually talking about myself. I have been a little rough around the edges, and I've upset some people, but I have apologized to one guy. He was coming.
I don't know what you're referring to.
It's not Uber. It's a Discord conversation that's been going on for about the last 40 minutes.
What are you talking about, Jimmy?
Okay, all right. Well, I'm talking about. I just wanted to apologize for being in the room, and then there has been a
being
time
in the Discord room,
Discord, and on LRN. I've gotten a little obnoxious.
LRN.FM.
Drop your call. The toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. I don't even know what's going on in the Discord. I haven't been paying close attention to it right now, so I don't know what he feels like he needs to apologize for. But if you feel like you need to apologize to people in the Discord, go ahead and apologize to the people in the Discord. They're there. They can read whatever it is that you have to say. Anyway, the Alliance says its workers are demanding fewer driver deactivations, an end to upfront pricing. Whoa, that would be a huge change. That's where the company gives you an estimate of what it's going to cost to get you from point A to point B, and then sticks to it, basically, even if the driver takes like a circuitous route. And a cap.
So they want to be paid for miles and not per trip?
Well, there is a mileage fee as well involved in Uber. So, but maybe they cap the mileage fee on whatever the estimate is, and then if you have to go around a different, I don't know. That's new to me. But either way, they say here that, quote, the gig economy is all about exploiting workers by taking away our rights, said Sanam Lama.
But it's literally you idiots owning the means of production. You own the tools of your trade.
Isn't this what they wanted?
Yes, it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they could just sit around, though, and watch machines do it.
Well, that's what's going to happen eventually, is they're going to get replaced by automated cars.
You're going to call a Google or a Tesla to come pick you up.
Well, if Uber can live long enough, that's their vision for the future as well. Where
that's true. They do have self-driving cars
Uber's
now.
Experimenting with that, and then Uber will be able to dramatically lower its costs, right? Because right now, if you are, if Uber quotes you $100 for a ride from point A to point B, well, the driver's getting $70 out of that $100. Well, you cut the driver out, and now you're talking about a much, much lower price. Even if Uber only keeps, if Uber's keeping 100%, but the driver's not there, they can then lower the cost to 50% of what it was, and it'll dramatically drop the price of transportation. But you're right, Aria. The person complaining here, who claims that she's been an Uber driver since 2015, Sama, or maybe it's a she, I don't know, Sonam, could be a male, Sonam Lama, she, she's saying it's exploitative. Well, now, wait a minute. You signed up for this.
Not only you signed up for this, you literally signed up for every ride.
That's right. You could stop anytime you wanted.
Or you could not take any given ride.
Well, if you don't, then eventually you'll stop getting them. So if you are given a ride and then you don't get it, and then you're given another one, and then you don't go, and you're not saying I'll take this ride. Eventually they're going to be like, well, this person obviously doesn't want to work, so we're just not going to send you any more rides.
Really?
So yeah, you got to take some percentage, decent percentage of the rides that are offered to you as a driver. More coming. It's Free Talk Live. You can bring up whatever you want here. Our toll-free number is 855-450-FREE, like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We're talking about the gig economy. Uber and Lyft, of course, the two most noteworthy and controversial companies in this space, both, from what I understand, losing money. Quarter after quarter, the Uber continues to post losses. So now they're turning to a public offering, and I guess Lyft already has gone public. So Uber's the next one to go public, and their plan is to go public, I guess, Wednesday or maybe Thursday, sometime this week. Drivers are going to protest in New York City as well as other cities across the United States and in the UK.
And this is tomorrow, right?
Wednesday.
Protesting?
Wednesday morning, so 2 days.
Okay.
Wednesday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. That's apparently the hot time. Everybody's going to work.
I'm sure.
And so they're saying, turn your apps off, drivers. Protest. Join the protest that's being organized by the Taxi Workers Alliance, which I find suspect. But
definitely.
The taxi, of course, companies have always been against Uber and Lyft and ride sharing. It's a huge threat to their oligopoly, the huge threat to their business that has been established for decades. The Uber and Lyft came in and they shook things up, and they shook things up in a good way. It lowered prices of fares. It gave people more choice in the marketplace. And what's happening in New York City, while it's going to make these socialists very happy that are behind these types of protests, is not a good thing for the riders. It's not a good thing for the people who, and we'll get into what's going on, because New York City in February just implemented a minimum wage for rideshare workers, which is a strange thing. Right. Like, it's a strange thing to say because these people are contractors.
Yeah, do they make you drive a minimum number of trips?
We'll get into that. There's a very strange formula that they've come up with. In fact, they address it coming up briefly here in this article. So there's some really weird stuff going on that's trying to basically, legally force fundamental changes onto these companies, basically force them to be organized in a way that they previously weren't. They are supposed to be contractors, where the drivers are taking on the costs of doing their business instead of putting them onto the companies. And as a result of that, the drivers get the supermajority of the money that comes in from the fare. Now, Melanie's saying she doesn't think it could work, but obviously there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of drivers who disagree and work this job full time. Now, how many of them are running the numbers correctly? We don't know. But if you want to weigh in here, you're welcome to. Our number is 855-450-FREE. And by the way, thanks to Derek, who is a Free Talk Live Platinum amplifier. I believe it's the very same Derek that you mentioned earlier here tonight. He amps the show at a platinum level, which we don't ask for, but he's doing it anyway. We ask for $5 a month. Platinum is $25 per month. So thank you to Derek for doing that. AMP stands for Advertise, Market, and Promote, and that allows you to get behind what we do here on Free Talk Live and help us get on more radio stations, which we should be announcing a few more this week. I confirmed today earlier that we added a handful more over the weekend, so very excited because we are getting very close to our 200 affiliate goal, which is a huge milestone for Free Talk Live, and this may be the week that we accomplish that. So thanks to listeners like Derek for backing us up. And there's like 199. There's just under 200 Free Talk Live listeners that do the AMP thing. So please go to amp.freetalklive.com. Your $5 a month makes a huge difference for us, and you get some cool perks like access to the AMP-only call-in lines. There's the AMP discussion groups on our Discord server and more. It's ampamp.freetalklive.com. So back to the story here about the strikes that are expected. Sonam Lema says the gig economy is all about exploiting workers by taking away our rights. So what these people have done basically is they started a job, which isn't of course like a real job. It's not like a typical job, because at a job you're an employee, right? Like you get told, you work at a pizza place, Aria. Mm-hmm. They tell you when to show up, right? Like you can tell them I can't work Fridays. Like you can, when you start the job, you can kind of set some basic, parameters, but you don't get to set them too much, right? Like they're going to determine whether you open or whether you close, and unless you've got enough clout, you've been there long enough to say I'm not working weekends or whatever. If you've got enough clout to do that, you can do that to some extent. But either way, they tell you how many hours you're showing up for, what days you're showing up to, and as a result of that, you get certain benefits of being an employee, which is to say the healthcare coverage or whatever other things that they offer you. In the gig economy, you don't get those things because it's a gig.
Yeah.
You are doing a job that is on your schedule. You're deciding when to work. You're deciding when to log into the app. You get to make more decisions. As a result of that, you don't get the same arrangement with the employer. And you're more replaceable as a result of that as well, especially in these gig economies where all you have to be able to do is drive not like a maniac and have a car with 4 doors that's within the last 10 or 12 years. I think Lyft lets you get away with 12, and Uber it's 10. So
Really?
It
was 3 when I looked into doing Uber once.
3 years?
Yeah. Had to be at least 3. No more than 3 years old.
No way.
Yeah.
You must be misremembering. When was that?
Oh, no. That was why I didn't do it.
When was that?
2015, maybe? No, not
No
2015.
way.
2016 or
No
2017.
way. Because
Sure.
maybe it was that way in Mississippi, but it sure as hell wasn't
It
here
could
in
have
New
been.
Hampshire. Because it was 10 years here in New Hampshire. I got in right at about the same time.
Interesting. Maybe that's vary by state. I don't know. I didn't
could
give
be.
any thought. I wasn't super interested in doing it anyway. I was like, hey, it'd be nice to make some cash this weekend.
Well, they definitely vary the rates by area, so they charge different if you're taking a ride in Manchester, New Hampshire versus Manhattan. So maybe they also vary the number of years. That seems shocking to me. 3 years, I mean, that would not be sustainable in any way, shape, or form, because then you'd have to get another car 3 years later that was also essentially a brand new car. I could definitely see that as being impossible to make money at.
Well, I didn't even think about the age restrictions behind Uber and Lyft when we were having that discussion about the sustainability of it.
Right. You can't bring an old clunker.
Right.
You got to have something that's newish, at least. So, it's not an exploitation if you've chosen to work for these people. But for these folks, that's not good enough. The fact that they agreed, oh, yeah, it sounds good. 80%, 75%, okay, sign me up. Now, all of a sudden, they want this, they want that, they want all these extra things. Well, guess what? That's going to raise the rates.
And they
Guess
can
what
stop
that's gonna
doing it
do?
at any time.
Right. Well, guess what's going to happen if they raise the rates?
People are going to move to a different taxi service.
That's correct.
Or ride-sharing
and that may be
service.
what the Taxi Workers Alliance wants. They may want to put Uber and Lyft out of business, with these strikes. Anyway, the planned strikes appear to be more organized and geographically diverse than protests that met Lyft's IPO in late March, which were mostly localized in California. It makes sense, though, considering Uber is much bigger than Lyft, and its IPO is expected to be the largest since Alibaba's in 2014. Even some presidential candidates are getting in on the action. And Bernie Sanders has tweeted about it, saying, Uber says it can't pay its drivers more money, but rewarded its CEO with nearly $50 million last year. People who work for multi-billion-dollar companies should not have to work 70 or 80 hours a week to get by.
I mean, if it's that easy, go be a CEO then.
Well, yeah, it's not that easy, right? Like, you have to have some special training and education and such and experience.
I think there's a bigger issue here, is that, it's not the ride-sharing driver's concern what is being done with that 30% that they don't get.
Mm-hmm.
They agreed to give up that 30%. If the CEO wants to take it, roll cigars out of it, and smoke it, that's his business. It is completely removed from their sphere of concerns at that point. But they're jealous.
Right. They're
looking at him going, no, he's got that big slice of cake, and I want his cake.
Well, sure. Like you said, the ride providers, the drivers or whatever, they could form their own company. Yeah. They could form their own group, but then they'd have to, hire programmers. They'd have to hire people because Uber sends them the fares. How are you going to get your fares if you start your own company? You're going to flyer the streets?
When I owned an IT firm, that was the most difficult task, was getting out there and finding clients to work for. So Uber removes that from their needs.
And that's part of the 30% that you're giving up. And that also includes, certain overhead that Uber takes care of. For instance, if somebody pukes in the back of your car, Uber will give you a cleanup fee. Now,
really?
You're going to have to prove to them that it's true or whatever. Right. So I don't know how much evidence they require to give you the fee, but that's the supposed claim. So Uber knows it has a driver problem, says The Verge. In its filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission declaring its intention to go public, Uber said that driver dissatisfaction was likely to increase as the company sought to reduce the amount of money it spends on driver incentives. Quote, further, we're investing our autonomous vehicle strategy, which may add to driver dissatisfaction over time, as it may reduce the need for drivers. So them admitting, hey, look, we're going to get rid of you guys. This is a temporary... Your driving career with Uber is at best temporary. And that's not a problem for me either, because if you're an Uber driver and you can see this on the horizon, it's obvious, right? Like it's not secret that Uber is developing these autonomous cars.
Right.
So you got to prepare yourself for that. And there's ways that you can do it, like handing out your personal business card to all your clients.
She seems happier. Her fur is so much shinier, silkier, softer. She has really mellowed a lot.
Sheba is 105 lean pounds of shiny, smooth, happy dog for life.
The shedding has stopped. The itching has stopped.
Since 2001, we've helped more than 250,000 dogs get over their nutritional deficiency miseries.
And saved our customers bazillions in vet bills.
Everything we tried failed except the Dynovite.
Come to Dynovite for help.
DINOVITE.com.
If you want the dog to be healthy, you got to feed it something healthy.
The omega-3 fatty acids.
Flaxseed, zinc, alfalfa.
The digestive enzymes that are cooked out of regular dog food.
Dynovite is nutrition.
Dynovite for life.
Don't let your dog itch, scratch, stink, or shed like crazy.
Come to Dynovite for help.
859-428-1000.
859-428-1000.
DINOVITE.com.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You're invited here to join us. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE, like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We've got the Discord on-air call-in line rooms. They're over at discord.lrn.fm, so feel free to reach out to us in that way if you prefer. And you'll sound almost like you're sitting here in the studio with you tonight. It's Ian.
Melanie.
Aria.
Talking about Uber and Lyft. Ride-sharing companies in general, and protests that's scheduled for Wednesday morning, not just in New York City, but in cities across the United States, also in the UK, where drivers will be logging out of the app and refusing to give rides for a 2-hour time frame in order to protest a variety of different things, basically demanding that they be treated like employees even though they're contractors.
And, like, you could go get a job as an employee if you want to be an employee.
Right, yeah. If you want to be told when to show up and what to do when you show up, then go work at any other place where you're no longer in the gig economy. Part of the idea of the gig economy is that you get to decide when to work. And I was reading a bunch of different stories about this today, trying to find a good one for on air. But you know, this was one of the complaints from these protesters. The idea that I'm sorry, I forget where I was going with that. Anyway, they're planning this strike for Wednesday morning, and they are going to actually apparently be out in front of Uber's headquarters protesting there as well. Uber and Lyft drivers in New York City got an earnings bump recently when the city council approved a bill, it's from TheVerge.com, by the way, requiring ride-hail companies to pay drivers at least $17.22 per hour. Now, the new wage law relies on a so-called utilization rate, which accounts for the share of time a driver spends with passengers in their vehicles compared to the time spent idle and waiting for a fare. So part of what you're doing when you're an Uber driver is if there's not enough, rides, if there's not enough fares out there who need rides, then you're sitting around. You're killing time. You're, doing whatever you would do to kill time.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to be paid while you're doing that.
Exactly. Which seems offensive to me that somebody could get paid for sitting around doing nothing, but that shows the mentality of the kind of people who are behind this strike.
Absolutely.
That they want to get paid for the time that they sit around and do nothing.
I mean, it's a really weird complaint. So you either get paid by the job or you get paid by the hour.
Mm-hmm.
If you get paid by the hour, all the downtime is factored into your wage. They don't just magically have more money to pay you extra for downtime. You're not really getting paid for downtime. You're just averaging out when you're actually working with your downtime and then getting paid a stable wage.
Yeah, and there's an article from Reason that actually gets into some detail on this formula that they're doing, because it's very hard to how does this work exactly? How do they determine who's working and when and how often? And it's complicated, and it's going to result in some manipulations to the supply of drivers. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But an Uber spokesperson responded by listing some of the perks available to drivers, including higher earnings and free 4-year college, while a spokesperson for Lyft said that driver wages have gone up over the last 2 years. Neither company would say whether they plan to use cash incentives to entice drivers to break the strike. Well, they won't have to, because the system is already set up to entice drivers to break the strike, because they'll have the the increased rates. Whenever, as I was explaining earlier, they call it surge pricing with Uber. I'm sure Lyft has their own trademarked name for it. But whenever there's a high demand in an area and there's not enough drivers, the rates go up, and then drivers are actually alerted. If I remember when I was a driver for Uber, I would get an alert on my phone saying, "Hey, there's a high rate over in this area over here. If you want to go and work," because they can't tell me to go and work. They have to entice me to go and work. Uber,
and they do that by offering you more money. And it sounds like 4 years of college. That's a pretty big...
That's their claim. Now, I don't know what you have to do to qualify for that. There's probably some minimum amount of hours or something that you've got to put in. They're not just going to pay the guy who shows up on weekends, to give a few rides 4 years in college. Uber has a complicated history with driver strikes. In January of 2017, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, the same group behind the strike this week, announced a strike at JFK Airport to protest Donald Trump's ban on refugees from 6 Muslim-majority countries. Uber was accused of breaking the strike, sparking backlash from riders who tweeted photos of themselves deleting the Uber app with hashtag #DeleteUber. The backlash lasted for weeks, priming the pump for a series of self-imposed scandals and executive purges from which Uber is still recovering.
Well, Uber didn't break the strike. The Uber drivers did.
That's right.
And you can't blame people for that. I mean, I wouldn't blame them for that. Oh, everybody is striking, so there's all these fares out here I can go get, and they're 3 times, 4 times what I would normally get.
Well, it's not even a political statement. It's like, okay, well, if everybody else calls in to work sick, that doesn't mean I'm going to call in to work sick.
Well, plus it's a stupid strike anyway.
Strikes are stupid. You either quit or you don't.
Well, look, I understand the idea of being upset at Donald Trump's ban on refugees. That upset me as well. I mean, that was an outrageous thing that Trump did at the very beginning of his presidency. We reported on it here, and we were not happy about it. But we didn't, protest by refusing to go on the air. I mean, what does a taxi driver or an Uber driver have anything to say? Like, why would you want to punish every single person coming out of the JFK airport for what Donald Trump did? That's the stupidest idea for a strike I think I've heard in a long time. You're punishing all the people, however many tens of thousands of them flowing out of that airport needing rides to somewhere by refusing to work because of what Donald Trump did. They didn't have any say in that. Those people getting off those planes, they just want to go home or go see their family or get to their meeting on time.
That is a pretty stupid reason to have a strike.
Yeah. Now, I understand that they might say that, well, our taxi drivers are mostly Muslim in New York because there's a lot of immigrant drivers, and I can understand, maybe why they thought this was a good idea, but you don't punish average people who had no say whatsoever in a politician's decision for the decision of a politician. It's just ridiculous.
Not. And all they really succeeded in doing, evidently, was giving Uber and Lyft
a bunch of work.
Yeah.
So,
because I'm not just going to stand out at the airport and be like, well, I guess I'm standing at the airport. I mean, you're going to go some other way.
Yeah. That said, it is extremely difficult, they say, to organize a strike among a group as disparate and diffuse as Uber and Lyft drivers. While there's sure to be a significant chunk of drivers logging off the ride-hail apps during the strike, it remains likely that others will see it as an opportunity to cash in on the disruption. Drivers are classified as independent contractors and, as such, tend to act upon their own self-interest.
And you said that Uber, at least, has a sort of blacklist, so to speak, or a waiting list, and then ultimately, I imagine a lot of these drivers that are generally active between those hours on those days are going to find themselves removed from being able to drive.
Yeah, but how would they be able to identify which ones are striking and which ones are
Because they
sick?
Ordinarily drive. Okay,
that's not fair, though.
It's not, but I still expect it to happen.
I don't know. I mean, that seems... I wouldn't say Uber isn't or can't be petty. I mean, they certainly could do something like that.
That's not really petty. If I'm like, okay, this is my business model, this is the work, and you're like, well, I'm not going to take these jobs because I hate you. That's the petty part. Somebody being like, well, I'm not going to do business with somebody who doesn't take jobs because they hate me. Isn't like that's not petty. That's
I wouldn't blame them if they could actually identify the drivers who were striking. I wouldn't blame them for that. Like if they were able to identify them because they're standing outside of their offices holding signs in their hands and then figured out who they were, facial recognition or whatever they would do for that. I could see that, but to just punish somebody who's normally working because they didn't work during those 2 hours,
whether or not they identify them properly, I don't know. I mean, I could identify them if I had enough time on my hands and inclination to do so. It's not that difficult.
So here's another related story. This from Reason.com. So The Verge has kind of like a left-wing tinge to it. Reason more libertarian. New York City's new minimum pay rules for rideshare drivers were intended to boost driver income, but they may be having the exact opposite effect. On Tuesday, rideshare company Juno, now this is from March, which is currently suing city regulators over the new pay rules, filed court documents showing their bookings are down 30% for the month of February. And it was that very same month when the new minimum wage, that $17 an hour minimum wage rule, went into effect. And their average hourly compensation as a result has fallen by 17%. So what's going on? How is this affecting the smaller companies? Was anybody thinking about them and the economics of this when they passed these new minimum wage rules? I suspect not. We'll get into it. It's Free Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live. You can bring up what you want here. The new minimum wage for ride-sharing contractors? How do you have a minimum wage for a contractor? It's getting really confusing in New York City. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that coming up here with you in the studio tonight, by the way. It's Ian.
Melanie.
Aria.
Also, I want to make sure you know about Freedom Fest. It's the largest liberty-oriented gathering in the world. Freedom Fest theme is the Wild West this year. Liberty and opportunity, or lawlessness and violence. People speaking include Penn Jillette, Lenore Skenazy, Candace Owens, John Mackey, Kevin O'Leary, Kevin Harrington of Shark Tank, Stephen Moore, Grover Norquist, and others. You can go to freedomfest.com/FTL. Get your tickets now. In fact, libertarians, conservatives, liberals, anarchists, capitalists, many folks will be mingling together to hear real debates, share solutions, and converse freely. freedomfest.com/FTL. You can use coupon code FTL50, that's FTL50, for a discount. And if you're not sure whether you want to attend, you can actually get the 5 best speeches from last year for free. You can watch them over at freedomfest.com/FTL. Judge Napolitano, Alan Dershowitz, Charlie Kirk, Heather McDonald, and John Mackey, all for free at freedomfest.com/FTL. It's July 17th through the 20th, by the way, and Free Talk Live will be broadcasting from the event. Once again, freedomfest.com/FTL, like Free Talk Live. We'll get back into Uber and the new ride-sharing minimum wage and what kind of economic havoc that is wreaking in the city of New York, which is where this has been put into effect. And it was challenged, by the way, by a couple of the ride-sharing companies, and the New York State Supreme Court has ruled in favor of New York City's taxi regulators. So Lyft tried to challenge the minimum wage, and they lost.
That's unfortunate.
So we'll get into it here, but first, Sarah is on the line in New Mexico. Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live.
I've been hearing that most of South America, France, Italy, and Canada have been turning communist or socialist, and Iraq had turned communist a while ago, and they put on the sanctions. And I even talked to Jamaican friends, and they told me came out that Jamaica, once upon a time, they had turned communist, and they put sanctions on them. I remember that. So, but I do believe it because Brazil, Bolivia, and Venezuela is definitely communist.
I don't know about that. I heard Brazil recently elected a Trump kind of character to the presidency there.
Well, I mean, Lula da Silva, the one before, he was communist.
Okay.
So
well, they elected somebody new. I guess maybe they didn't like the communism or something?
I have no idea what he is about.
I mean, it's possible in your mind that people could be unhappy about communism, right? I mean, after all, in communist Russia, people were starving. They were standing in bread lines.
They're starving in Venezuela right now.
Well, yeah, it's pretty bad. But you pretty much ignore all those details, right, Sarah?
Well, you know what? Like I said, it's always the sanctions.
See, it's the U.S. government's fault. They can't grow their own. They can't grow their own food, huh? They have to get all the food from outside of Venezuela.
Yeah, so communism only works if it can rely on the U.S.'s resources.
Well, I mean, they have to have fair trade. You know what I mean? So
they can trade with anyone who's willing to trade with them.
Well, no, that would be free trade. She's talking about fair trade, which is where there's government regulations, right? That's where the government decides who and where you can trade with and subsidizes certain trades and crops over others.
For example, what I want to say is the U.S. would say Canada and South America, Brazil, and Venezuela, if you trade with communist Cuba, we're going to put sanctions on you, and we're going to choke you out. The same thing they say China if you trade with North Korea.
Why do they need money or resources from the United States, though? Why can't they produce that themselves?
No. I'm not talking about the other countries.
Well, how can the United States choke them out if they don't need resources from the United States?
Well, I'm just saying you have to have global trading partners, for the economy to function.
But China will trade with them. Other ones, even if the U.S. refuses to trade with them.
No, but you know what? If Cuba is not allowed to trade with all of South America and Canada, they say that you can't trade, and they get choked out, and they blame the communist system. It's the U.S. putting sanctions pressures on other countries.
Well, no, hold on, Sarah. I'm against sanctions. I just want to be clear. I think people should be able to trade with whoever they're willing to trade with, whoever, as long as both sides are willing to engage in that trade across the whole world, they should be free to do so. So I agree with that there should be no sanctions, but that still doesn't answer the question. I don't know if you purposefully dodged it, so I'm going to bring it back around here. It doesn't answer the question about why people are hungry in Venezuela. You said that it's the sanctions, but that doesn't explain anything because Venezuela is basically, pretty close to the equator. It's a tropical climate. It's very, very warm there all year round. There's growing season basically constantly in Venezuela. Why is it that they're hungry? People are losing weight every year in Venezuela. Why, in your mind, is that happening? You can't blame sanctions for that, can you?
Well, I think it's once they declared that Hugo Chavez declared that we're a communist country, then they had to put a tax on that country to make the economy fail.
What?
So
well, the U.S. can't put a tax on another country. They can go in and blow them up and steal their stuff, and they're pretty good at that, but they can't tax another country.
Right.
So unless the U.S. has invaded...
No, they haven't attacked.
Okay.
The U.S. has not attacked Venezuela.
No, I'm talking about economic attacks. In other words, like they would say to Russia, we're going to stop buying your oil, tell all of the European countries to stop buying the oil, and it makes their economy fail. This is kind of the things that I'm talking about.
But wait a minute.
But then they blame the...
What does that have to do with whether or not they can feed people? Oil is a whole other question. That's certainly an international product that is going to be traded in, various different countries, between different countries and individuals around the world. But whether or not the country, and Venezuela happens to be rich in oil, but whether or not the country happens to be rich in oil has no bearing on whether or not people can grow food and eat it. So why is it that Venezuelans are hungry? You still haven't answered that question.
Well, I have explained to you because of the capitalist countries.
No, you cannot point to other places in the world and say it's because of them over there is why I can't eat.
So if there's all these other communist countries, half of Europe, Canada, all of South America, they can't among themselves produce enough to keep themselves from starving to death. They can still trade with each other, even if the U.S. and the rest of Europe put sanctions on them that says that they can't trade with those people. Like, why can't they produce enough among themselves to support themselves?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that they say that Canada, if you trade with Cuba and South America, the communist countries, that we're going to stop buying your cars or put sanctions.
She's saying that if Canada trades with Venezuela, that the U.S. will then put sanctions on Canada.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying.
But is there not enough of resources cumulatively in all of the communist countries for them to support themselves? Why do they need resources from the capitalist countries?
Well, I have no idea.
She doesn't know. That's an honest answer. Thank you for the call tonight. She doesn't know what she's talking about. 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. You can bring up whatever you want. The reason why they can't feed themselves in Venezuela is because of and nationalizing the resources there. The government took over businesses, and they ran them to the ground, and they overregulate, and more coming up. Free Talk.
Does your dog itch, scratch, stink, or shed like crazy? Come to Dynovite for help.
Order a 90-day supply of Dynovite.
Everything we tried failed except the Dynovite.
Pick up 2 bottles of Super Mega Fish Oil.
Get the 3rd bottle free. Packed with omega-3, DHA, and EPA fatty acids.
Super Mega is great for your dog's immune system, healthy skin, and soft, shiny fur.
Dogs love it. Try Super Omega Fish Oil.
Buy 2, get 1 free.
At Dynovite.com.
DINOVITE.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and you can dial toll-free here. Join us, bring up whatever you want, even if you're uninformed. We'll talk to you about it, just like we do with Sarah. The toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. And, of course, we prefer you actually do have some information that's of use and some experience, and that's what we've been talking about with Uber and Lyft. If you're a rideshare driver and you want to weigh in to the conversation, we'd love to hear from you on this. I know we've had them call the show in the past, and it's always interesting to hear their perspective. You know, how do you feel about this upcoming strike that's expected on Wednesday morning in places like New York City and other cities across the U.S. and the U.K.? They're protesting various different aspects of Uber that they don't like because they took a job, a contract job, and then decided they wanted to demand and turn that into an employee position where they get paid a minimum wage. And it appears the Supreme Court of New York actually agrees with these protesters and has ruled against Lyft's lawsuit. And also,
did this have wider implications for all contracting firms?
Good question. It could, I suppose, in theory, have an implication for other gig economy businesses in New York State.
I imagine that most other contractors, though, do a type of work that pays them significantly better.
So they're more satisfied with their job.
Yeah, they were probably nowhere near the minimum wage anyway.
And of course, the minimum wage in New York City is likely much higher than it is in a lot of other places as well. But we've got more on the story, specifically rideshare company Juno. Now, I'd never heard of Juno before. Have either of you?
No.
So, a relatively small company. They also, like Lyft, have sued the city regulators, the taxi regulations, whatever bureaucracy it is that comes up with those things, over the new pay rules. This is according to Reason.com, filed court documents showing their bookings are down 30% in just 1 month. So February was the month in which these new minimum wage rules came into play, and that same month, their bookings went down 30%. So that's a huge drop, very significant. And their average hourly compensation has also fallen by 17%. The memorandum filed by Juno in the courts reads, quote, "Costs have increased for riders. Demand for Juno's services has decreased, and hourly earnings for Juno's drivers have fallen," reads the memorandum, which warns that these effects will only get worse so long as these rules remain in place. The decline is particularly concerning. Juno's CEO, Ronan Ben David, wrote in a separate court filing because the company had been seeing business increase prior to implementation of the new pay rules. Juno performs only about 5% of rideshare rides in New York City, compared to 20% for Lyft and 70% for Uber. So these guys are third place and a distant third place. And that means that these new regulations are hurting them harder, as Reason will explain. Lyft, which is also suing New York City regulators and has since lost, by the way. This article was written in March. Reports that they too are seeing a decline in rides booked through their app, although it hasn't been as severe as the hit reported by Juno. Lyft estimates that the city's rideshare industry could see a $50 million decline in bookings in the year of 2019. In August of last year, the New York City Council passed a bill requiring the city's Taxi and Limousine Commission, TLC, the regulator responsible for the rideshare industry, and the target of Lyft and Juno's lawsuits, to come up with pay standards that would raise drivers' earnings to $17.22 per hour. In December, the TLC did just that. They issued new driver pay rules built around a complicated formula that factors in an individual's trip time and length, as well as a company's what they call utilization rate. And that's the amount of time that drivers actually have a passenger in their car. In the lawsuits, Juno and Lyft object to the Commission's rule on two grounds. The first objection made by both companies is the way the TLC driver pay formula employs the utilization rate. Without getting too into the weeds, the higher a company's utilization rate, meaning how much time they have a passenger in the car, so the more often that there's a passenger in their cars, right, the less they have to pay per trip to their drivers. That advantages companies like Uber and Via, which both have higher utilization rates, by allowing them to pay drivers less for the same exact trip. So, as a result of Juno being less busy, they have to pay their drivers more.
Because their utilization rate was
lower. Right.
Okay.
So, because
doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I get the logic behind what they're saying. I'm saying the legislation doesn't make any sense.
Right. It actually is benefiting Uber.
Shocking.
Yeah. So the Juno suit also argues that the companies with lower utilization rates have to raise fares in order to cope with the higher costs,
which lowers utilization rates.
Right. It scares away riders, further lowering their utilization rate and raising their per-trip costs, which requires more fare increases. The company says this vicious cycle will ultimately kill off smaller services, which makes you wonder if Uber secretly was in favor of the legislation in this particular case, because they didn't sue. It was the smaller guys, Lyft and Juno, who filed the lawsuits in this case.
Their silence on this subject is deafening.
Lyft also objects to TLC's formula calculating pay on a per-trip basis, which the company argues violates city council law establishing pay standards and creates distortions in the market. A report from MIT professor Catherine Tucker, filed as part of Lyft's lawsuit, argues that a rigid per-trip formula prevents companies from adjusting fares and driver pay to respond to changes in demand throughout the day. Tucker's report also argues the TLC's current formula rewards drivers for completing short, slow trips as opposed to longer and faster rides, essentially creating an incentive for drivers to service riders in dense Manhattan at the expense of commuters in the city's outer boroughs. That incentive works against another of the city's goals, that at least they claim, which is to reduce congestion in Manhattan. Starting in February, for-hire vehicles entering Manhattan have to pay a new fee designed to limit car trips on the island's gridlocked streets. Traditional cabs pay $2.50 per trip, while trips performed by rideshare companies are slapped with a $2.75 fee. Shared rides performed on Uber Pool or Lyft Line pay only a 75-cent fee. So now there's an extra fee if you just want to get into Manhattan, and they are biased in favor of taxi cabs.
Demonstrably biased. How would they know, however, that you're doing a rideshare program?
Well, a good question.
Is it perjury if they ask you that and you say, I'm not answering?
Perjury is only something that you do under oath.
Okay.
It's when you lie under oath.
And even if you just say I'm not answering, that might be some other crime, but it's not perjury because it's if you don't answer, if you say you're not going to answer and then you don't answer, that's not a lie, I guess.
I imagine
what if you do lie? What if you say, no, I'm not driving for Uber?
Good question. I imagine that they're relying to some extent on whatever visible Uber indicators that you have, because a lot of times the drivers will have like the little the letter U in their windshield. It's kind of lit up, so that way customers know that, oh, there's my Uber, right? Like they can see the logo. But I don't know how they would know whether or not you're being an Uber pool, because Uber has different types of ride shares. There's the one that's more of like a ride share where you're picking up other passengers along the same trip. That's what the Uber pool is, I think. And then there's the kind where it's just like, I want to be alone in the car. I don't want any other passengers. I'm willing to pay more. And so they're saying those you have to pay more for. Maybe they count the number of people in the car or something like that. I don't know. Disentangling the effects of the congestion surcharge and the fare hikes that followed the new minimum pay rules is difficult. Their combined effect is that rideshare trips are costing more, and people are now taking fewer of them. Thanks to perverse incentives contained in the TLC's pay rules, the decline in trips will likely not net out any improvements in congestion. As the market for rideshare rides shrinks, total driver compensation could start to fall as well. According to Juno's court filings, it already has. Now, it says here Juno and Lyft's lawsuits are still ongoing. That's not true anymore. Lyft has lost their suit. The New York Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Taxi and Limousine Committee, or whatever bureaucracy it is, the TLC in this case. So, sorry, Juno, I guess you're just going to go out of business in New York City. And ultimately...
do business elsewhere.
Yeah, that's really the thing that these companies ought to do, is they ought to just be like, you know what? We don't need it.
No, you really don't.
We'll just leave New York City. We'll operate in all the areas surrounding it. That's what they did in Austin a few years ago when the Austin City Council cracked down and came up with a bunch of stupid regulations. Uber and Lyft both were like, well, I guess we'll just service Round Rock and all the surrounding areas, and we just won't pick anybody up in Austin anymore. Sorry, Austin. We're coming up. This is Free Talk Live. You can bring up whatever you want here. We've been focusing on the ride-sharing business, specifically in New York City, because they are just screwing everything up. The New York City regulators...
That's what government does.
Yep. Well, they're screwing... I shouldn't say they're screwing everything up. They're screwing a lot of things up and favoring certain companies and certain, mega corporations. The taxi cab companies that, of course, have been in business there for decades are not happy about the existence of ride-sharing, and they would like to crush the ride-sharing companies. Uber is, of course, particularly ensconced with over 70% or approximately 70% of the rides in New York City from the ride-sharing side. So of those taking ride shares, 70% of them go with Uber. And we just learned from Reason.com how it is that the new regulations, minimum wage that has been put into place there for drivers of ride-sharing companies, that how that's hurting the little guys in the ride-sharing business. How a company named Juno, for instance, or even Lyft, which only gets about 20%, is being punished because they're not as busy. So therefore, because they're not as busy, they have to pay their drivers more under this new New York City regulation, which was recently held up by the Supreme Court there in New York State. Now, whether or not they're going to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court is another question. I have not heard that. But in the meantime, these companies might go out of business. Or at the very least, they may end up going out of business in New York City and continuing doing business in friendlier jurisdictions that aren't trying to, crush these companies out of business.
That is kind of a problem, though, because the cities that could actually sustain them tend to be liberal ones,
sure,
that are passing these sorts of minimum wage laws that will ultimately drive them out.
And that is another bad thing, is that a lot of municipalities play the monkey see, monkey do game, where if one municipality does a thing, then the other municipalities do the same thing. So we may end up seeing similar laws passed elsewhere. But as of right now, New York City, I believe, is singular in that it's the only place in the U.S., at least, that is treating these contractors like employees and guaranteeing them certain minimum wages. And so this could be very bad for other places, but so far they haven't implemented in other places quite yet. And it sort of brought me to another aspect of this that I thought would be important to point out, because Aria, you'd suggested that these frustrated contractors go ahead and just start their own company.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, as we've just pointed out, that basically will put them out of these new rules will put them out of business in an instant if they were to do that, because
not if they don't have employees.
No. This applies to all of the people with contractors.
Right, but if you are your own company...
Oh, you're saying you would be
they would have to program the app themselves.
Wait. Are you saying you as one driver would be your own company?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't what I don't think you were talking about, all right? You were talking about another ride-sharing app that could have multiple drivers?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the extreme version of this.
Yeah. Well,
but
right.
You are required, even if you own the company, to pay yourself a minimum hourly wage.
I guess you would be, yeah.
If you pay an hourly wage.
And there's also licensing in New York City now as well. So
yeah, so you still have to abide by all of that. That would be really unique to require a minimum profit, basically, for a sole proprietor.
It sure would.
New York's crazy enough to do that.
That's why they pay themselves by salary instead of hourly, is to get around that.
Well, the contractors are paid per ride, or that's the way it was supposed to be.
I'm talking about entrepreneurs who start businesses, and obviously they don't make enough profit at the beginning on the first day to pay themselves, a minimum wage. So the
average person
salary.
doesn't want to do that, though, right? Like the average person isn't enough of an entrepreneur. Like the people that join these companies as drivers are of enough of an entrepreneurial mindset to value the idea of setting their own hours, but they may not be enough of an entrepreneur to actually start their own company and have to go through whatever legal mumbo jumbo that they have to do, right? Like if you sign up for Uber and Lyft, it's like, you sign up, you give them your ID, they put you through a background check. If you pass the background check, you can start giving people rides. Like there's like a 15-minute training video that you watch that tells you to, be nice to people and whatever. Don't insult the handicapped people and, all that. But in order to start your own company in New York City, can you imagine how difficult that is? How bureaucratically frustrating that must be, to form whatever kind of New York corporation or...
Which is why you have to pay somebody else 20% to do it for you.
Exactly. However, what if somebody were to decentralize ride sharing, meaning that the ride sharing companies, Uber and Lyft, made an impact in the world by taking a established old business, an old centralized business like the taxi business, and they brought the internet to play in a way that had never been done before, and they allowed people to work as contractors and be given, fares through this sort of system. Basically, Uber and Lyft argue in their court filings and such that they're just a matchmaker. They're just a rider, driver, matchmaker. That's all they do. That they don't actually have cars, although eventually that'll change when they have their automated cars. But for now, they're just a matchmaker, just like any other matchmaking website. And I think it's a strong argument in their case. But what if this, decentralized ride-sharing app doesn't even have any kind of corporate structure at all? What if it's just an app? What if somebody just somewhere in the world programs an app that allows drivers to meet riders, but that there's no big, corporation in between siphoning off 20 or 30%? What if it's only taking 1% or 5% or, a very, very small amount of money just to continue programming the app and, offer some level of tech support for the app, but really ultimately doesn't have any kind of nexus in New York? So there's not like there's an office in New York State, that there's no group of people to be regulated, I guess is what I'm saying. It's just an app. It's like, hey,
if the app is being continuously updated and offering tech support, then it's not just an app, like existing in the ethereal realm.
Mm-hmm.
There's people there,
right? I don't know. I'm just trying to kind of figure out how this could differ, because I'm thinking like Cell 411, for instance. Right. Cell 411 is an emergency alerts app. That's its primary goal. You can have a list of friends within the app that also have the app, and then if something happens to you, maybe it's a tragic thing, you're getting pulled over, or your house is on fire, or whatever, or somebody's having a medical emergency, you can send out an alert to your friends, and they can, if they're available in the area, they can respond. And something they added to that app in recent years was a ride-sharing aspect. Now, I don't think it's very well utilized. It's not, it was never really marketed as the main purpose of the app, but it's there. And it allows anybody who uses the app with no oversight. There's no application that, like with Uber, you got to pass a background check. With this, and no background check because there's nobody checking anything. It's just a mechanism within an app that allows somebody to say, I got a car, and there's no rule about how old the car has to be or how many doors it has to have. There's none of that stuff. It's just like, you have a car? Go ahead, put your car into the app, put the details, put a picture of your car on your profile, and then you can just take anybody that needs a ride in the area. They can say, I need a ride. That offer will go out to all of the drivers that are within a certain vicinity, and you can decide as the driver, I want to, only receive requests within a 5-mile radius, a 10-mile radius. You decide right. What your territory is going to be. And so the ride request comes through, and more than one person could respond. So with Uber, again, it's more centrally controlled. Uber says, oh, Melanie needs a ride. Aria is the closest driver. Ping, Aria gets a ride request. You get 10 seconds to decide whether or not you want it. Otherwise, it comes to me as the other driver because I'm second closest to you. And then it goes to Matt, who's third closest to you. And then until somebody finally says, I'll take this ride. With Cell 411, the ride request goes out to all potential drivers in the area.
I mean, you can still find a way to automate that without, some sort of corporate structure.
Exactly. And so those drivers in the area can then respond and say, well, I can take you, and it'll cost you this amount of money. And then somebody else could respond and say, I'll take you, and it'll cost you this amount. So then you actually get competing bids from the different drivers. Instead of having, again, centrally controlled, Uber decides if you're in Manchester, you get paid $1 a mile. I don't know if that's what it is, but they decide on the mileage per market. Now, it's nice that they're able to change that market to market, but with decentralized ride sharing, each driver would decide what they're willing to charge. Oh, I'm at home right now. I don't really feel like getting up to and watching a movie, but if you pay me this amount of money, I'll take you to wherever you want to go. And then somebody else might already be on the road offering it for half the price. So then the rider gets to decide which person they want as their driver.
Well, see, you're being too consumer friendly, is what it is. And there's nothing, that New York City and places like that hate more than the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're literally the ones paying these people to actually do these tasks. That isn't important.
Yeah, all these fees fall on the consumer. All these extra increases, it's the consumers who have to bear those.
Right. Because New York, like most statist environments, has this mentality that they can fix all the world's problems. All they have to do is take a certain amount of money from X to give to Y. And magically, that somehow creates money.
It doesn't work that way, but even if they were to create money, that would also be a bad thing, too, as we've seen with the federal government and central banking and all that. So, I mean, we've yet to really see a good decentralized ride-sharing app. Cell 411 is probably the best that I've seen. There was another attempt that failed miserably, but it could be done, and it could be what these drivers need.
Would you like to hang out with Penn Jillette? He's keynoting Freedom Fest this year. I, for one, am thrilled. Freedom Fest is the largest liberty-oriented gathering in the world. They take a Big Ten approach with libertarians, conservatives, liberals, anarchists, capitalists, and just open-minded people mingling together to hear real debates, share real solutions, and converse freely. This year's theme is the Wild West, a time of liberty and opportunity, or a time of anarchy and violence. Maybe both. Go to freedomfest.com/FTL and get your tickets now. freedomfest.com/FTL. Not convinced yet? Hey, I understand. It's a high-end event. Even with coupon code FTL50. Sure, you're likely to receive investment advice that'll make that sum seem paltry, but I have something special for you. Go to freedomfest.com/FTL and you'll get the 5 best speeches from last year for free. Call it a test drive. Do yourself a favor and go to freedomfest.com/FTL. freedomfest.com/FTL. Use coupon code FTL50 for a discount.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can bring up what you want. Just dial in toll-free to join us here. Our number is 855-450-FREE like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. And with you in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
Melanie.
Aria.
We've been talking about strikes, specifically surrounding the protest that's going to be happening by Uber drivers coming up on Wednesday morning in New York City and other cities across the United States as they are protesting Uber going public with an IPO. It's just a time for them to make their concerns heard, and they want to be treated like employees even though they're contractors. And there was even a lawsuit in the UK that I believe was successful at making them seem as though they are, I guess the UK deciding that they are going to be considered employees. If I'm mistaken on that, correct me on that, please. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. But similar lawsuits in the United States have not been successful, where U.S. courts have decided, no, these are not employees. They don't meet any of the aspects of what an employee is like as compared to a contractor.
Which is true under at least federal law.
Right.
New York might have more stringent laws about that, but Uber drivers are clearly contractors.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of people who are contractors, and it's like, are you really? But we'll just go with it because it kind of benefits everybody.
And you know this because you are a tax professional, so you've looked at, companies' taxes, and you know a thing or two about what defines an employee versus what defines a contractor.
And there's a lot of things that are kind of shady, but if the IRS doesn't catch you, I mean, and I've never done anybody's payroll, so I've never put them in that way. They kind of come to me already having 1099s or W-2s, but...
What is the key distinction between an employee and a contractor?
It's a balancing test. It's if you set your own hours, if you use your own tools or equipment.
That would make you a contractor.
Yeah, if you're assigned jobs rather than time periods, if you have more or less control over the way the work is done. And like most contractors aren't actually contractors, even though they're paid that way, which is good because it's better for the employee and the employer.
Well, because the contractor gets the whole amount, they don't have taxes taken out if they're a contractor, right? You get paid for
it's
whatever the
a little bit more
job
complicated
is.
Than
I
that,
think
but
your
yes.
1099s are hit harder than your 1040s.
Well, not really.
Really?
It's supposed to be that way.
Okay.
So you have expenses. So if I'm an employee, I might be actually incurring expenses that I only incur because of my work. So I might have a bigger data plan. I might have to buy all kinds of uniforms and boots and whatever else. I might have all these expenses and mileage driving to job sites. Depending on how spread out your job sites are, that can be pretty significant, even though you're not. The IRS is lawful evil, and sometimes they overestimate how much things cost. I think that the IRS mileage is overestimated, but you get to claim it.
If you're a contractor?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So...
Well, you can do it as an employee as well.
No, you can't.
I know employees of delivery places that do.
That claim mileage on their tax returns?
Mm-hmm.
Like pizza delivery people?
For that.
They can what?
There's not even a space for that.
Well, they do it. They are most certainly employees. And I know at least 2 of them have done it.
And job expenses got removed starting this year.
For employees, is what you're saying. Yeah, see, I couldn't tell you. She's the expert on these things.
Yeah.
I haven't paid taxes since 2004, so I don't know.
But Uber drivers are clearly contractors. At least the way it's...
Right.
I don't know what they do in the UK, but in the US, Uber drivers are clearly contractors.
So we can there's not really much more to say about the Uber situation, but if you guys want to weigh in as callers, you're welcome to join the show. Let's go to Jay. He's calling from New Hampshire. Jay, you're on Free Talk Live. Hello there.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I wanted to...
Jay, do me a favor.
Know how roofers...
Oh, go ahead. You're all right.
Let you know how roofers get around to this employee tax thing.
Okay.
So in at least 2 states, I know of 2 operations doing this. And, for example, the workman's comp rate is like $27.50 an hour or something for every $100 you pay your employee.
Okay.
Well, to get a competent roofer to actually show up to work, that man's worth like $2,000 a week that does his job, especially like in these particular jurisdictions. And so when you got to pay a guy $2,000 a week and then you got to pay him $27.50 on every 100, that's a lot of money. So I know a couple of roofing companies, what they did is that basically the company is going to go out of business because they just couldn't afford to pay all their employees this workman's comp. So what they did was they set up as some kind of corporation, and they're all owners of the corporation. And most of them have the same last name, which probably helps too. But it basically turns into a few $100,000 a year in savings if they were to have to. And it has a whole bunch of tremendous other benefits too, like the roofing company owns all their cars and pickup trucks, so everything, they're all write-offs, for example, of all these these owners. So they'll definitely find all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of loopholes, as I'm sure Melanie's aware of, for particular situations.
So what you're saying is, even though these people, would otherwise be considered to be employees, under most organizational structures, this one's different because they're allowing them to be owners of the company to some extent. What is it like? Is it where the founder of the company has a large chunk of it, but then these guys have like 1%, or like how do they figure that?
Well, so definitely the one company, it's 14 guys, and they all own equal shares, and then the other one is a family, and Grandpa owns most of it, and the grandkids and the great grandkids own all their shares.
Fascinating.
These are the 2 outfits I'm aware of, but they don't have to pay workman's comp on the owner. It doesn't have to be, put in a workman's comp. Only employees. So if you own a landscaping company in this area, I don't know if this is true in all states, but in one state, anyways, or 2 states, if you own a landscaping company and you go out and mow lawns, you don't need to have workman's comp. But the minute you have someone working for you, that guy needs workman's comp, and like some outfit like OSHA in Massachusetts, they're not called OSHA, but they actually show up on the job site and they want to make sure you're paying workman's comp. They do this with roofers. and landscapers a lot, like in Boston and Springfield, Mass. Like quite often, especially the guy who's just there with the pickup truck, and got a couple of ladders tied to it, and he's just, fixing someone's roof and got a kid helping him. They try to nail those guys. They target them.
This helps because the company has to budget for workman's comp with every employee, but now they can budget to just pay these employees or pay these people, these co-owners, without paying them the workman's comp, meaning that they can pay them more technically. If they were charging the same amount, instead of having to hold back some for workman's comp, they can just pay it out. But doesn't this also have some maybe unintended consequences? Like, for instance, what if one of these co-owners is lazy?
Exactly.
What if they don't show up to work? I mean, how do they fire the co-owner?
Well, I don't know how that works, but I thought you were going to get to the point. Let's say somebody falls 2 stories and busts his whole body up and is crippled up. And now they're not collecting workman's comp. That's a lot of the issue. And like with the roofing family, these dudes are like super safety conscious, and I've worked with them. They taught me how to roof. Super safety conscious because they know that they're not receiving a workman's comp.
I imagine most people
they hurt themselves. Yeah,
I imagine most people would be a bit more careful doing these dangerous jobs if they knew that their livelihoods were literally on the line.
And roofing is one of the most dangerous jobs in the United States the world. Like if you look at the list of top 10, it's usually like number 1.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly surprised by that statistic. I would be more surprised, to see a roofer who was not safety conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Because, sure, I can fall off this
risk.
roof and, break my spine and never be able to walk again, but I'll get workman's comp.
Yeah, I suppose there's probably just something written into the provisions of how the business is organized that could allow them to remove an owner with enough co-owners voting to, vote that person out or whatever. So it's an interesting workaround, Jay. Thanks for sharing that. That's our Jay Noon. He's our Wednesday night co-host. But he won't be on this. You will be on this Wednesday night. You'll just be hosting with Chris.
I'll be there.
Chris Reitman will be here heading the show up as Mark and I head out to Tokyo. Thanks for the call, Jay. More coming up here, 8:55, 450, free like freedom. This is Free Talk Live. It's Free Talk Live. You can bring up whatever you want here. Our number for you, 855-450, free like freedom, 855-450-3733. Forkfest 2019 coming up soon in just over a month from now, actually. June 13th through the 18th at Rogers Campground. Beautiful location in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. You will be hanging out with other liberty-minded folks, libertarians, voluntarists, liberty-loving anarchists. And it's June 13th through the 18th. It's going to be a decentralized libertarian camping festival, which means there's nobody who's in charge. There's no organizers. There's no central committee. There's no tickets. There's no ticket price. It's the only cost of whatever it would cost you to get there and whatever it costs you to rent a camp space, which, of course, you can share with other people, so that can bring your costs down pretty significantly. Probably the most affordable libertarian camping festival as a result of that. So come on out and join us. Free Talk Live is going to be broadcasting from the event. You can join us. Go to forkfest.party to learn more. There's a Forkfest Telegram chat room. A couple of new people just joined that today. There's also the Forkfest forum, and it is in those places where you can kind of find out some of the things that are going on. What are the attendees planning to do? Because everything that happens is just created by the attendees. Whatever it is that they decide they want to do, maybe it's throw a party, maybe it's put on some sort of gaming event, poker game, or maybe they want to have speech sessions, or I don't know what they're going to do. I know I've heard a few different things are being planned. There's Man Camp, which Jay Noon, who just called in a few moments ago, he's putting that together. Which will like help people learn how to do manly things like chainsaw or whatever. So that should be fun.
Grill a steak and all that good stuff.
Yeah, like metalworking, I think. And then there's Derek and Steven from AnyPay that are going to be throwing basically raves every single night in a tent that they're going to be putting up with some pretty badass sound speakers from what I'm told. And Steven's going to be DJing those. So that'll be cool. The Big Gay Dance Party is moving. It's back from it used to happen at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and the last time it happened there was in 2015. So it'll be the first time returning, the Big Gay Dance Party returning, but not returning to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, returning to, for the first time ever, Fork Fest. It's the 3rd annual Fork Fest. We will look forward to seeing you there. Forkfest.party is where you can go learn more about that. So our toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. It's Ian and Melanie and Aria in the studio here tonight. We've been talking about employee strikes or contractor strikes in the case of the Uber strikes that are expected to happen on Wednesday morning. But in other news, there's a video game company called Riot that is Riot Games based in Los Angeles. And I have not played a Riot game before, but apparently they make a game called League of Legends. I've heard of this game. I am guessing it's like a role-playing game.
It's a MOBA, a multiplayer online battle arena, kind of like Smite, the one that I can quite often be seen playing. It's just a PvP game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's based around, it's not based around, it's very similar to Defense of the Ancients or Dota.
This is all outside of my experience with video games. I don't know what any of that means.
Well, it's basically 4 players versus 4 players or 5 in some instances.
So it's not like a massively multiplayer game?
No.
Like a World of Warcraft or something like that?
No, it's more like a first-person shooter, except it's not a shooter or first-person.
So it's like a third-person thing where you're like behind
Smite
the character?
is third-person. Dota and League of Legends are top-down.
Oh, I see. Okay. But you're in a relatively small game with only a handful of players.
Right.
That's what you're saying. So, according to Kotaku.com, there was a walkout today. Over 150 Riot employees walked out to protest forced arbitration and so-called sexist culture.
Forced arbitration usually isn't upheld anyway.
Forced arbitration usually isn't forced because you signed up for a contract.
Well, right, that's also true. So forced arbitration is never upheld.
Right.
If you, in fact, kidnap people and bring them to your arbitration courts, the state courts are going to throw that out.
Right.
And probably have some other things to say. But arbitration clauses are usually not upheld anyway.
They're not upheld? Just period?
Usually, if they're in a form contract, they're usually thrown out.
Meaning that if a company, you get a job and it says in the contract that if you have any issues that you can't go to court, you have to go to arbitration. You're saying
has one of these.
Most companies have them because nobody wants to go to court.
It's in every contract ever because court is more expensive than arbitration and drags on forever.
Right. Arbitration is relatively quick compared to courts. And
shocking.
And the longer you have to spend in a legal system, the more costs you're incurring. So it's more expensive to go through the court system as well.
Apparently, I have a fundamental constitutional right to make T-Mobile spend money on lawyers if I decide I'm unhappy with them for no reason whatsoever.
So what you're saying is every time it's been challenged, arbitration clauses are struck down?
No, I said usually.
Usually.
I'm not going to say every time for anything that has anything to do with law. Because there's always going to be some crazy judge somewhere who's going to not do it. But
why are they striking them down? I mean, it's a contract. Shouldn't they be upheld? The person signed the contract.
Yes, but this is what state courts are doing. So.
Mm-hmm. Because it benefits them?
What?
Because it benefits the courts, basically? Is that the idea?
I mean, that probably doesn't hurt, but if you want to maintain a guise of, I'm here and I provide these services, and that's why I have to bomb the Middle East and steal half your income. If someone else starts having competing services in in your core areas, it probably isn't great for your legitimacy.
I see what you're saying. So, over 150 discontented Riot Games employees walked out of the League of Legends publishers' offices in Los Angeles today to protest the company's stance on forced arbitration. Standing in a parking lot on Riot's campus, employees held picket signs and gave impassioned speeches. Quote, "We're asking that forced arbitration be ended for all past, current, and future Riot employees, including contractors, and in current litigation," said Jocelyn Monahan, a social listening strategist. What do you think that is?
A made-up position of somebody who's, in fact, unemployed.
Social listening. Is that somebody who reads tweets about your company? And
that would be my guess. Something along those lines.
In an interview with Kotaku, standing in front of a sign reading Rioters Unplugged, a play on Riot's internal Riot Unplugged meetings, Monahan would later tell her assembled colleagues through a megaphone, asking to feel safe does not make you entitled. Not sure what that means. Monahan had one major point she hoped to get across to her colleagues, even those who chose to stay at their desks and continue working. She says, We are what makes Riot great. I want us to feel solidarity and connection with each other. I want us to feel connected. I want us to feel like our voices are heard, and heard in a way that matters." Unquote. Colleagues took turns speaking through the megaphone, with several admitting that they were scared to participate and be labeled as anti-riot. Said one, quote, "I was worried. I was like, what if I go and no one shows up? I'm a little less worried about that now," that person said. Others are showing their support with the hashtag Riot Walkout hashtag, which others...
Those are two very different things. Walking out is one thing.
And tweeting about
riot,
it?
No, a riot is an entirely different thing.
Well, a riot's the name of the company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry
but it becomes a lot funnier if you overlook that.
Yeah.
Also true.
More coming up here at 8:55, 450 free. This may be the very first ever labor-related walkout for a large game studio. And there's been a call among some people in game programming for unionization of their employees. We actually just happened to cover that last night. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live has found that though U.S. financial institutions are prohibited from doing business with foreign gambling websites, it's not illegal for U.S.-based internet users to gamble on those sites. People have been using VPNs or virtual private networks to connect to sites like games.bitcoin.com and play games with Bitcoin Cash. Games.bitcoin.com features poker, blackjack, roulette, craps, keno, slots, and dice. You can conduct your own investigation at games.bitcoin.com.
Yep, it's Free Talk Live. You dial in, toll free. You can bring up whatever you want here. We're talking about a game company having a walkout today involving at least 150, according to the article over at Kotaku. 150 of their employees walking out and speechifying to one another about getting rid of arbitration clauses in their contract, and also apparently over some sort of alleged sexual harassment within the company. With you in the studio tonight, by the way, it's Ian.
Melanie.
Aria.
We can go to your calls and thoughts here. You can bring up whatever you want to discuss, but also I want to make sure that you know about the AMP program, and thanks to Cam Cakes, who is a Free Talk Live Platinum Amplifier, meaning Cam Cakes gives $25 a month to the show. Now, we only ask for $5. But for whatever reason, Cam Cakes wants to do more than that, and we're not going to say no. So if you want to help support what we do here at Free Talk Live, then go to the AMP program at ampamp.freetalklive.com. You can get signed up there with credit card, with PayPal, with Bitcoin, BTC. If you like the fact that we're on nearly 200 radio stations from coast to coast, and also on other platforms like Twitch and DLive on the internet, podcasts, live streams, we got all that stuff. If you appreciate it and you want to help us do more, then please go to the AMP program and sign up and get the perks over at ampamp.freetalklive.com. As we continue, we go to your calls and thoughts here. David is in New Mexico. You're on Free Talk Live. Hello, David.
Hey, yeah, I just got off a 4-hour-long phone call with the public defender that was helping me.
Wow.
We accepted the conditional surrender of the state of New Mexico just now.
What happened?
Well, in that case where the state of New Mexico was prosecuting me for the University of New Mexico radio station KUNM that wanted me to go to jail for 364 days for calling into their KUNM call-in program.
Right. Yeah, you'd called into a call-in show. They told you to stop calling. You called back, and then they had the police come arrest you.
Yeah, well, there's one step in between the arrest. Here's another funny thing that happened. Here's how good your government is. They arrested me because I failed to appear to the hearing when they had sent me a summons. But the state of New Mexico, being geniuses that they are, they sent the summons to a non-existent address, and it was returned to them, and the court records indicate the summons was returned as undeliverable, and then the judge issued a warrant for my arrest because I didn't show up to the hearing that the summons that they sent out went to
that you didn't know existed. You didn't know the hearing
exactly.
existed.
So they arrested me for that, and I spent 3 days in jail for their clerical error.
Sounds typical for government.
Anyway, the state of New Mexico has decided that they would like to conditionally surrender to me. They give up.
What are the conditions?
The conditions is they this is all a pride thing basically. If I don't call the program that I already don't call for the next 6 months, then they'll dismiss the charge. So anyhow.
So your argument in that case was going to be that this is a public university and that because it's publicly funded, therefore you should be able to call even if they don't like it. But
that's my argument, yeah.
You never had the chance to make the argument because they want to get you out of their courtroom. They want to say, we're willing to drop the charge just as long as you don't call for 6 months.
Right, but what they don't know is that now that I'm not spending any time or energy fighting them in a local metropolitan court over a misdemeanor, now I have time to go to the federal courthouse and file a civil rights, a 1983 claim over that same issue that they are discriminating against me on several different levels and telling me that all other political opinion is welcome to call in and question or comment, but if your name is my name, then you cannot call in, and because we don't want to hear from you anymore.
So you're saying you're going to escalate this? You're going to take this up to the federal courts?
Yeah, I'm going to. They wanted to prosecute me criminally, and so now they've surrendered on that one, and I'm going to go to the federal courthouse and prosecute them civilly and ask them for some money for my trouble.
Now, what are your views or characteristics that you happen to possess for which you would be discriminated against?
Well, several different levels. First of all, let me answer the discrimination thing second. First of all, there is a First Amendment civil or free speech association aspect. That's enough all by itself. That's enough to file a civil rights claim. On top of that,
not for deplatforming.
Well, he was deplatformed by a government agency.
It's a public company or public college, so it's not the same thing as Facebook or YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, from my viewpoint, the public radio station at the University of New Mexico is no different than the motor vehicle department. If I go into the MVD and they say, "No, David, we don't want to give you a driver's license. We don't want you on our roads anymore." The public radio station owned by the state of New Mexico is no different. It's no different than them saying, "No, David, we're not going to give you a license to be on our radio station. We don't want you on our airwaves anymore." To me, it's the same thing. They're both publicly controlled and paid for institutions. It's the same.
Now, do you have an attorney who's going to help you with this case, or are you competent enough legally to be able to file a civil case in federal court on your own?
I don't yet have an attorney. I will be asking attorneys if anybody wants in on this case, and if they don't, I'll do it myself. It's really not that difficult.
I know. I'm going to tell you right now, 1983 claims are incredibly difficult, and no one should be filing them other than an attorney who specializes in 1983 claims.
Now, I mean, best case, Melanie, I mean, this case involving him not being able to call into a radio show, I mean, do you think there's going to be a significant compensation here? I'm going to guess no. Even if he were to prevail.
I would imagine not, but I don't know that that's your goal necessarily, right?
What is your goal?
Well, there's two goals. One is that they need to reverse themselves and allow anybody who is within the normal parameters calling in and I don't mean normal parameters in a narrow focus. I mean in the broader sense. If they have a valid point and it's anywhere near in the area of their topic, that they don't discriminate and censor which of those individuals' speech they're going to allow, unless they want to sell their radio station to a privately controlled enterprise, and then they can do what they want because it's their private business. But as long as the taxpayers own you and pay for you, then you need to stop censoring and discriminating against who can call in.
So what they could do is they could just close down call-ins and just not take any calls whatsoever, right? Like they could do it that way, but as you're saying, as long as they have calls that they're allowing, they should allow calls from anybody.
Yeah.
Should they
Because
allow calls for a minimum amount of time? So because, for instance, on this show, we are not a government-run entity, so we get to make decisions about all kinds of things. But ultimately, I decide whether or not I want to continue with a call. If a call's boring, if it's uninteresting, it's not going to last as long as an interesting caller. Are you going to try to argue that all calls should be given a minimum amount of time? Because what if they let you call in and you're like, I'm David from New Mexico, and I think that you guys are bad, and then you keep trying to talk, and then they cut you off. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, unless they're trying to game the system. So the short answer to your question is no. I'm not trying to have to do with that. What I am trying to have altered is when they maintain a blacklist that Ian Freeman, we do not like his political viewpoint, and we are not going to allow Ian Freeman by name to call in to our radio program. That is the behavior that they should not be allowed to do. And so they should be allowed to scrutinize, like you're saying, with the exception if they're doing that and using that instead to accomplish the same goal, and it's obvious, which it would be, if every time Ian Freeman calls in, they let him talk for 10 seconds and then find an excuse to end the call, and all of their other calls average out to 2 minutes or a minute and a half. Then that's obvious and looks like they're trying to skirt the ruling. And,
thank you for the call tonight, David. The toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. As far as being an attorney and taking on that case, it just doesn't sound like there's a big payday.
Well,
it doesn't sound like there's a case.
Often get attorney's fees in 1983 claims.
Oh, okay. But
so the attorney might get paid and you get $20.
More coming up. Free Talk Live. This is Free Talk Live, and you can bring up anything you want in these remaining moments. There's enough time for you if you dial in right now. Our number here is 855-450-FREE, like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We've got our Discord on-air call-in line rooms over at discord.lrn.fm. You can jump into one of those. You'll sound almost like you're sitting here in the studio with us tonight. It's Ian.
Melanie.
Aria.
And, of course, you can join us online over at freetalklive.com. We've got live streaming that we do on DLive and Twitch. DLive is currently, it's like the new kid on the block for live streaming platforms, video streaming. DLive.lrn.fm is where you can go to follow our profile there, and you'll get to watch not just Free Talk Live, but also Aria Show Call to Freedom that happens on a weekday basis from 4 to 7 in the afternoon, so just before Free Talk Live. So you're actually on your 6th hour now of doing talk radio here. And DLive is on track, I would say, to within our first month being on DLive, because we've been on there for almost a full month. We may actually exceed the number of followers that we have on Twitch. So nice. DLive may surpass Twitch within the first month of us being on DLive, certainly within the second month. I'm sure it will. But we've been on Twitch for more than a year. So DLive, we've reached almost Twitch levels of followers with, almost 12 times the quickness. So that's pretty impressive. So thanks to everybody following us on either platform, whichever your preference, twitch.lrn.fm and dlive.lrn.fm. Let's go to Rick. He's listening in Georgia to WWNS. Hello, Rick.
No, it's Rex, brother.
Ray?
Rex. R-E-X.
Rex. Sorry about that. The board up misspelled it there. Go ahead, Rex.
All right. Well, I was just wanting to weigh in on y'all's little dilemma about the Ubers and the yellow cab.
All right.
Tell me about it.
Well, I'm a Houston, Texas yellow cab operator, licensed by the city of Houston, and I also drive for Town and Country Airport Show. I pick up people from the hotels and get them to the Intercontinental or the Hobby Airport, whichever one they got the flight out of.
Okay.
And I did it for a long, long time. And as far as that yellow cab, listen, man, if you go drive the yellow cab, you can expect to spend a lot of time on your taxi stand trying to get a wink of sleep in the back seat. Can't afford no hotel room, can't afford to rent no place, just
Really?
I tell you what, yeah. Buddy,
You're saying it's tough. You're saying working for Yellow Cab is tough. Now, do you actually rent?
Cab, Yellow Cab, Liberty. I tried a little bit of all the taxi cab drivers, and they all the same. You lease your cab, you got to pay that lease to start with.
Right. That was what I was going to ask you. Is what do you got to pay them a nightly fee, or is it weekly?
Yeah,
how does that work?
You pay them out of how many rides you get. They just charge you a certain amount every month. It's just like making a car payment.
So you don't pay up front. It comes out of whatever you bring in for the night.
No, I think he was saying the opposite.
Yeah, you are. You obligated to pay that lease regardless, and use the money that you make off of the rides to pay your lease with.
Right, so but are you paying up? But are you paying up front? Meaning, do you pay the lease that night before you take the car out?
Yeah, you drive all night and make the money, and they get it.
Okay, so it's after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay, because I asked you if it was beforehand. You kept saying yes.
You just don't get none of the cash. Is what I'm saying. They used to get to keep none of it.
Well, wait a minute.
If it's all
you're still getting.
When they gave you the call, they get most of the money off the call.
Well, right, they're getting.
You still have to pay your lease.
Right, and you can't use your own car, right? So you have to use their car. So
yeah, if you drive a yellow cab, you got to have a yellow cab under you.
They got you by the balls, basically. They got you, every way, which way and sideways.
You have to have a license. You have to have a license through the city of Houston.
So you have to get a government permit in order to get the car in the first place.
Yeah, city government permit.
Yeah, so you got to pay that. You got to pay the government gang. Thank you, Ray, for the call tonight, Rex, rather. So you got to pay the government gang their fee. Then you got to pay the taxi cab company their fee to be able to take their cab out, which they then, they have to send you the business. So if they don't like you and they want you to stop, doing business with them, they can just cut down the amount of fares that they're giving you, and eventually the amount of fares you got coming in won't be enough to cover the fees you got to pay. So they can kind of, push you out in that way.
Isn't that the case in New York as well, as far as these taxi tokens and things like that? I heard they were pretty valuable.
In New York, they have what's called a medallion. Yeah.
Is that it?
They used to be as much as like $1 million for a medallion in New York. It since has come down because of Uber and Lyft, so it's no longer as expensive. But they have a very limited supply of these medallions because they didn't want too many people competing on the streets. They wanted to keep rates high.
They wanted to manipulate the supply.
That's right.
In order to... Yeah,
and they're doing the same thing now with Uber and Lyft in New York City, where they are no longer handing out licenses. So if you want to be an Uber driver, in most cases, like in New Hampshire, if you want to drive for Uber, as long as you or Lyft, as long as you can pass the background check and you have the car that qualifies, meaning newer than 10 years, usually 4 doors, you're good to go. You can just start giving rides. But in New York City, you have to get a license. So there's an extra hurdle.
But again, how would they know
in the process?
Unless Uber or Lyft was willing to turn that information. They are?
Yeah. Yeah, because they if they don't do what the city says, then they'll come after the executives.
Yeah.
So
well, get out of New York City then, Uber. That's the solution here.
That's the best bet, absolutely. But that is a lot of money that they'd be leaving behind, so you can understand why they do try to jump through some of the hoops.
Yeah.
In that case. So, we were talking about this Kotaku article about 150 programmers, 150 or whatever their job is at Riot Games in Los Angeles, walking out what may be the very first labor-related walkout for a large game studio in history. The company's management is allowing its employees to participate and has urged managers to be accommodating and understanding. In an email to Kotaku this morning, Riot representative said, quote, "We respect rioters who choose to walk out today and will not tolerate retaliation of any kind as a result of participating or not." Because there were obviously people who did not want to walk out. They wanted to keep working. In the months since Kotaku's investigation uncovering endemic sexism at Riot Games, 5 current or former employees sued the company in part for violating California's Equal Pay Act. Last week, Riot filed a motion to force 2 of those current employees into arbitration, an extra-legal forum where a suit does not go in front of a jury. Recently, 20,000 Google employees walked out to end forced arbitration. Months later, Google announced that it would comply, but only for harassment cases. Last week, Riot announced that it would now allow incoming employees to opt out of forced arbitration for harassment suits and would consider extending that to current employees, quote, as soon as current litigation is resolved. So when you look at arbitration, which we were discussing earlier, the reason why it exists in these contracts, and there's arbitration in like your cell phone contract, there's arbitration in pretty much every terms of service.
If you've signed a form contract, there's an arbitration clause in it.
And that's because arbitration's faster, arbitration's cheaper, it gets the job supposedly done. Now, what I would like to know from anybody that knows a thing or two about arbitration is, does it seem to be fair? Like, meaning, I think the classic argument against arbitration is, well, yeah, sure, of course corporations want arbitration because the arbitrators will rule in favor of the corporation. Is that true?
I don't have any idea.
Do you know, Melanie?
I don't know.
Do you have any idea about arbitration? I mean, you went to law school.
I don't know.
Yes.
It's never the employee requesting an arbitration clause, though. So
sure,
that's probably why that idea, is prominent.
Yeah, but that's probably largely just because an employee has no idea
what arbitration
to
is.
ask for, or
Right. Employees aren't going to court
True.
all the time, whereas these corporations are being sued left and right in a lot of cases.
You just walk in and they hand you a stack of documents and they're like, sign this, and you're like, okay.
Right.
Like, that's about as far as most employees are going.
So I don't know if that's true. I mean, I would be interested in hearing from people who've actually gone to arbitration and who had a positive or negative experience with it. Did you feel as though your side of the case was listened to? Was it actually...
Well, it can't do worse than a state judge.
Well, yeah.
That is not true.
I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure. Like, if the arbitrator is beholden to some extent to the corporation, then they might be more likely to rule in favor of the corporation. On the other hand, maybe arbitrators are more professional. Maybe they're more, on average, maybe they're more likely to give fair rulings than somebody in the so-called justice system.
I would like that to be the case. I just don't expect it to be.
Well, they're definitely professionals. That's
Right.
what they do for a living, unlike a jury.
But aren't most of them like retired judges anyway?
That's another good question. It's sort of like this area that I know exists, but I don't know a whole lot about it and how it works.
I'm going to have to look into it.
So if you know more, you can tell us another night, because we're done for tonight. You can join us online in the meantime, between now and then, on freetalklive.com.
You love Bitcoin. It's the future, right? Well, no, not if everyone stops using it. I mean, think about it. How many places in your town take Bitcoin? One? None? Let's be real. If this Bitcoin thing is ever going to happen, it's going to need your help. The good news is, the guys at AnyPay have your back. We built a website called helpmetakebitcoin.com, and it's a place you can send any business, and they'll be set up to take Bitcoin in 5 minutes. Helpmetakebitcoin.com.